Hello, thank you for coming, everyone. My name's Alex. When I'm not standing in front of people talking about modular synthesizers, I make videos on the internet. Yes, I am a YouTuber, but it's not my full-time job. It's a passion of mine, which is also modular synthesis, another passion, and something I've been asked to talk about today. Big subject. It covers a period of about 50 years, maybe even more, 50, 60, 70. We've got 15 minutes, and we also have to have a quick rave at the end. So everyone get your dancing feet on. There will be an opportunity to dance. So what is a modular synthesizer? Okay. Now, imagine a sound. Imagine a sound right now in your head. Any sound. Sir, what does your sound like? Ooh, that's nice, sir. What does your sound like? Nice, nice. What does your son sound like? Ah. So, imagine a sound, any sound at all. A modular synthesizer can make that sound. Imagine, therefore, a box, a dream box, capable of making the sounds that you imagine in your mind and turning them into something that you can let other people hear. And of course, we have just actually used our voices to say the sound, which some would argue is much more affordable and more efficient. I would argue that it's worth investigating whether a few £1,000s sunk into a box might be another gratifying route at arriving at exactly the same thing. A modular synthesizer is a dream machine for making music. That's what it is. And it can be anything that we can afford to make it. So a modular synthesizer could be an effects box. That is a box that takes sound from other things and applies sound to them, makes them sound like they're in a cathedral, or makes them sound very echoey, or makes them sound spacey or very angry. It could process anything. It could be our voices, it could be a guitar, it could be a badger. It could be a drum machine. Or it could be a drummer. A modular synthesizer could be the drummer in our band if we wanted it to. It could be a meditation machine. It could be a machine that makes the gentlest sounds in the world, as we heard just before. Or it could be a machine that makes the angriest sounds in the world. It could be a magic and accompaniment machine that listens to our performance that we play and improvises its own thoughts on top of that performance. You could build a modular synthesizer to do that. Or you could build a modular synthesizer to help you make dance music in front of a crowd in real time. So where did modular synthesizers come from, first and foremost? What are we dealing with here? Well, as I said, there's about 50 years of history. We're not going to go through it all, but I want to mention two names, unfortunately both of which are men. Let's hope that changes over time. They are Don Buchler and Bob Moog. Don and Bob are two examples of the same kind of thing. Both people who make modular synthesizers, but both with completely different approaches. Don was based on the West Coast in California. He was drinking lots of funny juices and hanging out with wacky people with long hair. And Bob was the son of a pianist and an electrical engineer, and he was hanging out on the East Coast. Bob went to university, actually didn't finish university until he was much older. He dropped out to start making synths. But Bob's approach was different to Don's. Bob used bright, buzzy sounds, bright, buzzy noises, and he used filters to smooth out those buzzy noises. And Don was the opposite way. Don started with smooth noises, and he used devices to make them more buzzy. That is basically what they did. And this refers to a school of synthesis called West Coast and East Coast, both of which are in the case over here. But we'll come to this in a bit. So modular synthesizers, for a long time, were the only way of making synthesized music. By synthesized, I mean where you use a device to create sounds, and originally the thought was that modular synthesizers would take away the jobs of musicians. People who play the trumpet, the clarinet and stuff would be out of a job because your modular synthesizer would be doing that for you. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Although modular synthesizers can make very realistic versions of real instruments, what is much more interesting is a modular synthesizer doing what it does best, which is just doing weird modular synthesizer music. However, that did not stop one of the best-selling albums, classical albums of all time. This was Switched on Bach, being, and I quote, it was from January 1969 to 1972 was #1 on the Billboard Classical Albums chart. That is by Wendy Carlos. And Wendy switched on Bach on a Moog modular synthesizer. She used a modular synthesizer to make one of the best-selling pieces of classical music of all time. So a modular synthesizer can sound extraordinary and really caught the ears of people. And there are these two different approaches. So, but really, what do they look like? You know, I have one here. Wendy had one in her studio. Well, they look like a box covered in wires with faders. And as Lena was talking about earlier, the interaction between a human and a machine is a hugely important one. The way that we interact with the machine changes whether or not we want to interact with the machine. And it changes how much you choose to interact and what you make. It's really important. And so a modular synthesizer is amazing because you can wire up functionality. You can make it do whatever you want it to do, and you can give yourself, with just one pair of hands, just enough to do, and just enough to be able to control the music, but let the machine take care of most of it for you. What they are not, although which they technically do contain, are computers. They're not like computers where we have to use a keyboard and mouse. And again, as Lena is saying, what's so important is that we have, with computers, we're seeking physical extensions for them. Devices like the Push-2 that we saw earlier, where we can touch the computer in a way that is not based on a keyboard and mouse like we do at work. That's what modular synthesizers can offer. And anyway, so you had these two people, Don and Bob. Fast forward 40, 50 years to 1995 to Germany, and a man called Dieter Dupfer, started a new format. He took a racking standard that was used for putting office like workstations together, I think, for like making custom devices that had a certain height. And he took that same standard and he applied it to synthesizers. So he made these little modules, they were called, which he called the A100 system, and what most of us call Eurorack. And now Eurorack is just one type of many types of modular synth, but that's what I have. This is a Eurorack synthesizer invented by Dieter. But what happened was, for a long time, not much happened. Dieter released this in 1995, and he did sell his modules, but it was kind of only until like the 2000s, 2002, 3, 4, 5, that it really, really went crazy. And now there are thousands of modules you can buy from hundreds of manufacturers. There are more ways of spending all your money than there have ever been before. It's really, really awful. But for my wife, this stuff. But it's amazing as well, because look, I can have all of these things, and if I can think of something I want to be able to do, then there is a module I can buy, and there's a way I can wire it up to make it do that thing. So if you can dream it, someone makes a module to do it, or more importantly, for people who use modulars, you can wire it up to do that. So here ends our technical bit, and let's go to the rave section. So I'll use this as an opportunity to talk about what my modular does. So my modular was designed for doing improvised dance music in front of a crowd, where I have no idea what I'm going to play. I could not repeat the same performance night after night, or even minute by minute. It is always going to be slightly different. You can always have every setting in a slightly different position. And I built this so that I could just improvise and have fun, because I, as a person who understands how electronic music is made to some extent, find that when you go and see shows where someone is playing live, but there's no element of risk, I find that to be, I can't get behind it. I need there to be a part of risk, or an element of risk. And we could have a big debate, and I do with my wife, about what is the value of art? What is the value, is art like, is a painting good because it was technically difficult to paint? That we can apply the same things to this. So it's something that I'm wrestling with metaphysically. But what we should do is actually make some music. So I'm going to turn this up, and I'm going to show you the kinds of sounds that I have in here. So can you hear this? So I have drums. Drums are one of the most important parts of a dance. You need drums to dance to. So we'll start there. Now, I can, instead of pushing a button and telling the machine what pattern to play, I just want to be able to do one single point of interaction and turn a dial. I'm a simple beast. Let's keep things simple. So by turning a dial, I get more drums or less. And interestingly, for the geeks among you, my drum patterns use the geometrical theories of Euclid from 300 BC. That is actually how they operate. I'm not making that up. That's literally how they work. So let's get some other things. There we go. Where's that? Nice steady rhythm. I'd like someone to explain from a genetic or biological level, why does having the snare on the 2 and 4, why does that just make it feel like it's going forward? That's another thing I'm wrestling with, but that's not for another day. So another tap is I can turn this dial. This sort of sounds slightly out of time. That's better. And interestingly, this drum module, this uses a topographic map of world rhythms. Imagine a big map of the world, but it's all of the world's rhythms on the map. And I have an X and a Y coordinate, and I can direct my module to go to a different geometric location. That's how my drum module works. And that's true, I'm not making that up either. I'm really not. So, let's get some bass going. Euclid again. Euclid makes my bass lines as well. And I can make my bass notes long or short. Yeah. And I can apply effects. I have beautiful effects which are all code running behind the machine. It's not all analog. All the best stuff is digital. So I have chords. But my chords run through analog filters. Those of you who like download music will know that. Thanks very much.